Unable to endure her loneliness, a female prisoner begins a secret affair with a guard and gives birth to a child behind bars. The unprecedented scandal sends shock waves through the British authorities. Officials strip the woman of custody of her child. They then exile her to a plantation in the American colonies for violating the strict moral laws of the time. After passing through the hands of child traffickers, the baby girl is sold to a Romani family. 8 years pass in the blink of an eye. Moll has always believed she was meant for something greater, and after years of cruelty from her foster family, she decides to flee the place she has never considered home. She races through the crowded streets and accidentally catches the mayor meeting his mistress. The girl desperately explains that she does not want her foster family to take her back. The woman beside him takes pity on the distressed child and persuades her lover to give Moll a home. The mayor can hardly refuse, though the matter still has to go through the proper legal process, so an impromptu hearing is arranged to decide Moll's fate. At the hearing, Moll explains that she is often left hungry and abused by her foster family, yet the law says that does not give her the right to simply run away. As her hope begins to fade, Moll looks toward the mayor's mistress in the audience. She asks the mayor to make her a lady, just like the beautifully dressed woman he was kissing moments earlier. Terrified that his affair will be exposed, the mayor quickly silences Moll and agrees to take her in. But when he strokes her filthy hair, he cannot hide a flicker of disgust. And just like that, Moll is taken into the mayor's home. Along the way, admiring townspeople watch him perform the role of a generous public servant to perfection. But is he really that noble? Another 2 years pass. Surrounded by plates of delicious food, Moll has transformed from a grimy child into a graceful young girl. Even now, however, she has no idea what place she truly holds in the household. Perhaps she is a servant, or perhaps something caught between a servant and a member of the family. When she's done with all her work, she can sit at the dining table and eat with everyone like the other children in the family. It wasn't until she was 18 that all kinds of trouble began to hit her. With her beauty and intelligence, Moll conquered Roland, the eldest son of the mayor's family. At the same time, her youngest son Robin also fell in love with her. Although Robin wants to express his love to Moll in advance, his appearance does not seem to be the type that Moll likes. No matter how affectionate Robin is, Moll has no interest in him. The eldest son Roland has a completely different personality. Roland is eloquent, good at communicating with girls, and even better at playing hard to get. He saw that Moll discovered his whereabouts and deliberately did not say hello to her, which made the girl feel very disappointed. Not only that, even when Moll sang at home, Roland pretended to read a book, as if he had no interest in her. It was this indifferent attitude that made the girl develop strong feelings for him. Sure enough, when Moll finished cleaning up the house and was about to go downstairs, the eldest young master blocked her by the stairs and gave her a sweet kiss when he came up. Roland told Moll that he had fallen in love with her, and it's all her fault because she can no longer control her feelings. The eldest young master's lips seemed to be smeared with honey, and with a few words he resolved the previous estrangement and held Moll just right. At the same time, he also agreed on a place to meet the next day, which can be said to be a vivid interpretation of hard to get. Even during tea time, Moll was still restless and even broke the dessert that was served. The second young master next to her thought Moll was sick, so he kindly asked her to go back to her room to rest. As everyone knows, all this is caused by the girl's eager mood. Early the next morning, the family was chatting in the living room. The eldest young master walked directly to Moll, handed her a bag of gold coins, and asked her to help deliver it to a businessman in the inn. The speaker has no intention, but the listener has intention. Although Robin has no idea what his brother is planning, he still insists on accompanying Moll. But the more he stalks her, the more the girl dislikes him. Moll told Robin that she did like him, but only as a brother. Later, Moll walked into an inn and knocked on the door with anxiety. When the girl walked in, the young master had been waiting for a long time. There is no such thing as a businessman. In fact, Moll knew it well, but still asked about the situation like an innocent victim. Roland's eyes full of contempt seemed to have seen through the girl completely. Then, he picked up a gold necklace that had been prepared from the table and put it gently on Moll's neck. Not only did he give Moll the gold coins in his hand, but he also took out another bag of gold coins as a symbol of his loyalty to her. The rest will fall into place naturally. In this way, the two have maintained this relationship. Even in every corner of the home, they can't help themselves from time to time. Half a year has passed in the blink of an eye. Fortunately, Moll was not pregnant, but the second young master was still reluctant to leave her. even to the point of almost madness. At a family gathering, Robin took the initiative to marry Moll in front of his parents. He said that he loved Moll more than life and was determined to marry her. But Moll has been working hard in this family for 19 years, and his wife still thinks that she is just a beggar, and it is impossible for her son to marry such a girl from a bad background. Even the mayor was firmly against it. Robin turns out to be hopelessly devoted to Moll and swears that she is the only woman he will ever marry, but the girl pretended to be the young master in her heart. Faced with this fate-changing moment, Moll was obviously hesitant. As night fell, Moll was still worrying about what happened during the day, when the eldest young master suddenly broke into her room. However, can they really maintain this relationship as if nothing happened? Roland kept praising Moll for doing well and not telling their secrets, but when Moll offered to marry him, the man hesitated. It was as if this was not the result he wanted at all. Roland spun lies in an attempt to deceive this innocent girl, but things have developed to this point, and we have to find a way to solve it. Moll even fantasizes about eloping with Roland. As everyone knows, how could the eldest young master give up the opportunity to inherit the family property for such a woman? The vow he once made to Moll was just an excuse to satisfy his temporary desires. What is even more unexpected is that the eldest young master has become more unscrupulous now. He even suggested that Moll marry his younger brother first and continue to have contact with him after marriage. Such a hypocritical purpose is really intolerable to Moll. Moll finally realizes that Roland has been using her all along. Unfortunately, the girl woke up too late. She lay on the bed and cried bitterly, but things don't seem to be irreversible. Moll must choose between marrying a man she does not love or living on the streets, starving, and perhaps even selling herself. The next day, the family held a solemn and formal discussion meeting. Moll's attitude changed 180 degrees. She admitted that when she rejected Robin before, she just wanted to get the approval of the mayor and his wife first. Now, the girl has confessed her thoughts, which has not only established a good image for herself, but has also been unanimously recognized by the other parents' parents, not to mention how happy the second young master was when he heard that his father agreed to their marriage. Roland also said many good things about Moll in front of his parents, so Robin naturally wanted to thank his brother for everything he had done, but in the entire family, only Moll knows what a hypocritical person the eldest young master really is. The wedding took place as scheduled. Moll holds the mayor who adopted her on her left hand, and on her right stands the two brothers she grew up with. The elder brother seemed to be happier than the younger brother. After all, he not only got rid of Moll's entanglement, but also facilitated a marriage. Afterwards, the family sang and danced happily, and the parents even showed their long-lost smiles. After the excitement, Robin couldn't wait to drag the bride to the second floor to spend their wedding night. Time comes 5 years later. The long and tedious years are finally over. Moll had 2 children and survived an emotionless husband, and Roland, whom she loved deeply, has never appeared since her marriage. At the somber funeral, Moll can barely conceal her relief. The priest on the stage accidentally noticed her expression, and her bright smile even made him forget to pray. Such a young and beautiful woman received a large fortune after her husband's death. All in all, she was free, determined not to bear the pain of widowhood. She left her 2 young children in the care of her mother-in-law, and happily headed to London to experience a life of freedom without restraint. Before long, Moll arrives in the city she has always dreamed of seeing. This place is far more prosperous than home, and handsome men can be seen everywhere coming to strike up a conversation, which makes Moll, who has never seen the outside world, find it refreshing. But she must first find a place to settle down in a fashionable part of the city, and then find a way to squeeze into the upper class and seek her next love here. It is undeniable that many nobles covet Moll due to her various charms. A man tries to get close to her and offers Moll to be the woman behind his back. Moll actively rejected the other party's kindness, because she has gold coins in her pocket. She doesn't want to be someone else's accessory, but is sincerely looking for her ideal husband. The men present shook their heads after hearing this, and even thought that she was not suitable for this mixed circle. Unexpectedly, a bloated gentleman behind him became interested in her. He is a businessman who inherited a considerable inheritance after his father's death, and now only lacks a wife to spend it with him. For Moll, this is obviously a good choice. As a result, the two began to interact frequently. The man is funny and very romantic. He saw someone selling flowers on the street, took the initiative to pick up a bouquet of flowers, knelt down in front of Moll sincerely, and proposed to her. He asked Moll if she would be his wife and help him spend the inheritance together. What Moll is most concerned about is how much inheritance he has. In this way, Moll got a new husband amidst laughter, and officially started his second life. The gentleman was indeed very kind to her. Every day he either spends his days in the opera house or appears in entertainment venues where he spends a lot of money, enjoying the life of the rich to the fullest. This unrestrained pastime lasted for 2 years. Not only did the husband lose his entire inheritance, he also almost took advantage of Moll's property. Until one day, the sleeping couple was suddenly awakened by a knock on the door. Obviously, the creditor came to the door. The husband quickly got dressed and prepared to leave this place of right and wrong. At the same time, he reminded his wife to leave quickly to avoid being harmed by creditors. As her husband escapes through the window, what will be Moll's fate? After she was abandoned by her second husband, Moll originally wanted to find a place to live in the slums of the city, but the scene in front of me is really shocking. There are dirty deals everywhere. As long as you are willing to sell your body cheaply, you can live there for a long time. But Moll has dreamed of a better life since childhood. After a brief thought, she decisively rejected the other party's request. She was used to the life of the rich. How could she suffer in this dirty market? So she used her little savings to buy a dress and went to the bustling port area, where she tried to catch a rich husband. With the experience of interacting with rich people last time, Moll is obviously no longer timid this time. She took the initiative to approach a group of businessmen and sat down next to them. Moll deliberately brought up marriage and satirized the current captains who only value money when marrying their wives, trying to attract the attention of these rich captains with eloquent words. Unexpectedly, this trick actually worked. Her words soon caught the attention of a young captain. The man said that he was a captain looking for his wife. He does not deny that money can help a man buy a better boat, but there are more important things, such as a pleasant appearance and a kind and loving heart. When he gets married, it will be for love. Such affectionate words made Moll feel happy. She successfully captured a handsome man and followed him back to the merchant ship. The sweet words along the way even made the man unable to help himself. At the same time, Moll is also very realistic and constantly inquires about the other party's net worth. Moll is not satisfied until she hears that Lemuel owns 3 plantations in Virginia, bringing in £1,200 a year. After all, she had experienced the life of the upper-class nobility, and America was also called a wilderness. But currently, Moll is playing a wealthy widow who is having a hard time finding the real ideal person, so she has to agree with Lemuel. Afterwards, the two came to the quiet cabin. Faced with such a warm atmosphere, there is always something to do. In this way, Moll gained her third husband. The two held a simple wedding in the port of London and decided to go to America to live together. However, before the merchant ship set off, a group of prisoners bound by iron chains also had to board the ship and be exiled to that barbaric land. When Moll sees a suffering female prisoner, she feels an indescribable ache in her heart. It was like some kind of omen for the future, hinting at her equally tragic fate. After a month of sailing, the merchant ship finally approached the American continent. Moll was particularly excited because this was a world she had never been exposed to. She didn't know how to face her husband's family. Lemuel's mother has been waiting at the pier for a long time. Moll set foot on this unfamiliar land with the support of her husband. After the mother and son experienced the joy of reuniting after a long separation, Lemuel began to introduce the wife he married in the UK. But the older woman shows no surprise and asks Moll how much dowry she has brought.
Little more than I stand up in, ma'am.
Bewitched and bedazzled by a handsome trollop.
Obviously, she was not satisfied with this daughter-in-law. Moll followed behind to explain, admitting that before she met Lemuel, she was a penniless widow. She said poverty is not a sin and rich people do not necessarily possess virtues. Lemuel on the side also confessed to his mother that the two people truly love each other. At first, the old woman teased Moll in front of everyone, saying that she was a very wealthy woman, because the old woman also had a bad past. She could see something in the other person's eyes. But soon, her attitude changed dramatically and she took the initiative to give Moll a hug. This left Moll, who was still in a state of emotional distress, a little confused. But now that the other party has recognized her, Moll takes advantage of the victory and tells all the sweet words that have been brewing for a month to the mother-in-law who is about to take her home. After several hours of traveling, the group finally arrived at the plantation. Although there is no bustling scene like the streets of London, the Lemuel family estate still exceeded Moll's expectations. Most importantly, her husband gave her a complete home so that she no longer had to live a homeless life. In the days that followed, a nearby church became Moll's favorite place. Some exiled prisoners will also come here to get spiritual sustenance from the priest. In this way, 3 years passed by in a hurry. Moll gave birth to a pair of children for the family, lived a happy life, and had a better and better relationship with her mother-in-law. Until one day, when her mother-in-law and daughter-in-law were walking in the wild. Moll curiously asked her mother-in-law why she came to settle in Virginia in the first place. The old woman showed her a long-lasting wound, the mark she had left in prison for theft. It turns out that my mother-in-law was also an exiled female prisoner. She now trusted Moll enough to tell her about the experience. Now, my mother-in-law's husband has passed away long ago, and she has inherited thousands of acres of fertile land. But there was one thing that always bothered her. Before being exiled, she gave birth to a baby girl in prison. The cruel officials took the child away from her arms, leaving the mother and daughter separated from each other. After the older woman made her fortune in America, she heard that the child had been adopted by a Romani family. Later, for unknown reasons, the child spent his youth in the mayor's house. And finally there was no news from him. The speaker has no intention, the listener has intention. Isn't the girl described by the old woman Moll herself? An invisible pain filled Moll's body. She struggled to run away from her mother-in-law, and all hell broke loose. Moll can hardly believe that her mother-in-law is actually her biological mother. She actually married her half-brother. This heavy blow left Moll overwhelmed. Facing the night of married life, she categorically refused her husband's approach because the marriage itself was a mistake. While praying in church during the day, she saw the priest's eyes staring at her, as if God was condemning her soul. This leaves Moll even less able to accept her situation. After the woman returned from church, she became ill. The husband originally wanted to come to visit with his 2 children, but after seeing her husband and children, Moll felt even more painful, so she quickly asked her mother-in-law to take them away. Not only that, even when she slept in the same bed with her husband at night, she felt that her soul had been tainted and tried to wash away the dirty feeling with clean water. When the husband discovered this scene, the feeling of being insulted came over him like a tidal wave. He could never accept that his legitimate wife would do such a ridiculous thing. Watching her husband come home depressed every day, an unprecedented idea came to Moll's mind. The following dinner time, she deliberately caused chaos in front of her mother-in-law and husband by proposing to return to England. The husband does not allow her to leave and requires her to stay here and learn to be a qualified and obedient wife. Moll said that she could no longer touch him or even bear to look at him. The husband could never understand why his wife, who had once vowed to stay together forever, had such a huge change in attitude. Even her mother-in-law could no longer tolerate it and decided to have Moll sent back to England to prevent the family from perishing. However, Moll carries an unspeakable secret in her heart. She asked her mother-in-law to go to the 2nd floor, ready to tell all the misunderstandings buried in her heart. The woman came upstairs with mixed emotions. The mother-in-law would never have thought that the daughter-in-law in front of her, who suddenly became manic in temperament, was actually her long-lost biological daughter. Moll reminded her mother-in-law that all the problems started when she told her story about losing her child. Because he is that child. The mother and daughter actually recognized each other in this way. After a brief hug, the mother suddenly understood and decided to let Moll return to London immediately. Perhaps this is the best choice. Moll also thinks so, but how should they tell Lemuel the truth? Both of them were afraid that he would not be able to withstand this sudden blow. Just when they were worried about this, Lemuel broke in with a gun. He believed that Moll was no longer worthy of being a qualified wife and that she had ruined the happiness between the two of them. She has become crazy since the last time she went to church. She even believed that she was guided by the devil and decided to shoot and end her wife's life. Seeing that the situation deteriorated rapidly, before Moll had time to explain, Lemuel actually fired. Just as Lemuel raised his gun for the 2nd time, his mother could no longer hide it and told her impulsive son that Moll was his biological sister. This is like a big joke. Who would have thought that his wife was actually his half-sister? And so Moll says a painful goodbye to her family at the dock, leaving her 2 young children behind as she sails alone for England. Perhaps this is the best choice. She found the family she had longed for, but had to face the world alone. Before leaving, Lemuel gave her some goods as transportation and made Moll promise that she would never return to Virginia again in her life. This way, Lemuel can remarry. However, there are unforeseen circumstances. Moll encountered a violent storm at sea and most of its cargo was destroyed. By the time she arrived at the port of London, she had only £200 left to survive. For the poor, this money may be enough to live frugally and live hand to mouth. But Moll is just the opposite. She immediately bought herself a dress. She knows that this is an era of trade, so her face and body are her most trustworthy assets. Later, she used the remaining money to rent a beautiful carriage and rent the best room and the most popular inn in London. All this is to prepare for contact with the upper class. Sure enough, Someone took the bait the next day, which Moll seemed to have expected. A rich girl wearing a fashionable dress came to visit. News that a noble widowed woman was staying at the inn had already spread throughout the area. The girl sincerely invites Moll to attend the dance the next night, where she can get in touch with many upper-class people. What's more, the girl's cousin will also be attending, because the moment Moll stepped off the carriage yesterday, the girl's cousin Jemmy was attracted by her stunning beauty. Faced with such a warm invitation, how could Moll miss this rare opportunity? The next day, she arrived at the designated place on time. The magnificent building before her fills Moll with excitement, as though she is drawing closer to the future she has always imagined. She walked into the dance party dignifiedly, and was introduced to her handsome cousin Jemmy by the wealthy daughter. Moll's beauty attracted many people's attention, and many distinguished guests were amazed in the audience. But Moll was only interested in Jemmy in front of him, because she learned from the other party that Jemmy had a luxurious manor in Ireland waiting to be inherited, which completely matched her imagination of the ideal husband. At the same time, Jemmy also heard that Moll had more than £10,000 in the bank. The two are a perfect match, and there is no more suitable partner. In this way, they get along happily every day, and from the initial simple acquaintance, they gradually develop into an inseparable couple. In a suitable atmosphere, Jemmy proposed to Moll, but there is one ridiculous obstacle before marriage. Because Jemmy is a Catholic, his bride must confess her experience to a priest before the wedding. This is a set process that every Catholic must follow. The priest will not ruin the wedding because the bride has an unspeakable past, nor will he reveal anyone's secrets to the public. So, Moll, led by the priest, went to the back room to talk, while Jemmy and his so-called cousin were waiting outside. In the face of his devout faith, Moll did not hide his experience. She told the priest everything, that she was actually a penniless widow. She also revealed that she had had 3 husbands before, one of whom was her half-brother. This bizarre past left the priest dumbfounded, but the priest swore to his faith that he would not tell Moll's secret, but he was somewhat shocked in his heart. So, Moll and Jemmy completed their wedding amidst cheers and followed their husbands to live in a manor in Ireland. The so-called cousin also went with them. However, when the brother and sister-in-law were playing around, the cousin's eyes seemed to be filled with anger, as if there was an ulterior secret between the two. When the carriage passed through a small town, because it was getting late, they could only stay temporarily and continue on their way the next day. But just when they were about to take a break, things changed drastically. The husband asked his cousin to live in the next room while he prepared to enjoy the world of two with his bride. But in a warm moment, he tentatively asked his wife when the more than £10,000 could be withdrawn from the bank. Moll seemed a little confused because she had never said that she had such a huge amount of property. Unable to lie to her husband, she could only admit that she had nearly £100, which was all she had in the world. Jemmy, however, firmly believed that she had £15,000 in the Bank of England because Seagrave had sworn to tell him that this was true. Moll insists that she never told Seagrave any such thing. After hearing this result, both of them felt that the sky had fallen. What makes Moll even more unbelievable is that her husband's so-called cousin is also fake. She is just a promiscuous woman who has been with Jemmy for more than 2 years. Now the truth is revealed. Jemmy couldn't stand being deceived and decided to kill the lying woman in anger. Perhaps Seagrave was also dazzled by the benefits. She would never have expected that a widow wearing a high-end dress and living in an expensive inn would turn out to be a poor man with only £100. At the critical moment, Moll stopped her husband's impulse in time and saved Seagrave's life. But things have come to this, and they have to face reality. After all, Moll and Jemmy have completed their wedding. Unexpectedly, Jemmy is also a real liar. It turned out that he had already lost all his family property in order to repay his debts. The reason why he married Moll was because of her non-existent £15,000. Neither of them thought that they were actually the same person. Jemmy assured Moll that he never meant to hurt her and that if everything was true, he would love her until death. Such affectionate words made Seagrave very excited. After all, she also loved Jemmy deeply. Now it seems that all Seagrave's hopes have been dashed. Jemmy thought Moll would leave too, but even though Moll knew that the other person was a scoundrel, she really fell in love with him. Even Jemmy couldn't believe it. It was one hell of a trick. So, the two spent their wedding night in a small hotel. Early the next morning, Jemmy quietly got dressed and left the hotel alone while his wife was still sleeping. Before leaving, he did not forget to snatch a horse from nearby. The boy's shrill cries finally wake Moll from her deep sleep. Seeing the note left beside her, she immediately realized what had happened and hurried to the window to look out. Unfortunately, her husband had already disappeared without a trace. Jemmy said in the letter that since things were irreversible, They could only separate temporarily. He must go out to find wealth again, relying on his wisdom and the sword in his hand to make a living on the road. Until one day he finds Moll again. Jemmy left Moll's world, which even broke her heart for a time. But life goes on, and the gears of fate keep turning. So Moll decided to return to London and got into a crowded carriage. Maybe life is always full of surprises. A young banker next to him took the initiative to show his kindness to Moll, hoping to find some interesting topics to enrich this long and boring journey. Even the priest next to him joined in the chat between the two. But on this deserted road, a burst of noisy shouts instantly broke the tranquility. Several masked men rush from the woods, making it clear that Moll and her companions have been ambushed by robbers. The leader ordered everyone in the carriage to get down. When Moll stepped out of the carriage, although the other person's face was covered, it was clear from his eyes that this person was the Jemmy who abandoned her. Therefore, Moll did not say anything, but stood in a row like everyone else, waiting for the robbers to search for their belongings. Faced with the threat of weapons, everyone obediently took out their money. When it was Moll's turn, she also handed over her jewelry to him. But things didn't end there. Jemmy pulled Moll away from the crowd, lifted the veil, and told her his helplessness and difficulties. The woman did not blame him, but hoped that Jemmy would take her away with him, because Moll loves this man so much. She is willing to stay by her husband's side no matter what difficulties she encounters in the future. Jemmy said that this is not a job that women should do. He didn't want to see Moll do this. If he can develop, he will definitely come back to look for Moll. This is a choice Jemmy made out of his love for Moll. He also gave all the stolen jewelry to Moll, hoping that the two would have the opportunity to meet again in the future. Among the 4 marriages Moll has experienced, Jemmy is the only man who truly makes her emotional. After experiencing this accident, everyone got back on the road. The banker on the side was very concerned about Moll and asked her if all her money had been stolen. Moll remains calm and lies that she has hidden most of her savings. When they passed by a hotel, they decided to stay here before continuing on their way the next morning. Moll sat down with the banker for dinner. In fact, a woman has long sensed that the man opposite her likes her, so she begins to make plans for the rest of her life. She lied that she was a weak woman and was afraid that the savings she carried with her would be robbed. Besides, the people here are mixed, and she hopes that Bland can stay by her side to protect her. Bland has been guarding the door with a weapon, and he doesn't even dare to look back. He is indeed an honest man, but no matter how determined a man is, he cannot resist the various charms of a beautiful woman. A few words full of hints soon brought Bland to bed. A few days later, the two finally arrived in London. Bland was very kind to Moll and specially found a place for her to live locally. The landlady is an old acquaintance of Bland. Although the room is not luxurious, the environment is very comfortable. After the boss lady left, the man couldn't wait to have sex with Moll, but the woman chose to refuse this time, because the two were not married. She didn't want the relationship to last forever, and Moll didn't know each other at all. What is unexpected is that Bland actually has a wife. He has fallen in love with Moll and doesn't want to hide it anymore, but his relationship with his current wife was not good, and he even brought Moll to his wife's place of work to let her see what the woman was doing every day. Since his wife is like this every day, why doesn't he choose to divorce? The man expressed his difficulties. He is just afraid that after divorce, his wife will take half of his property, and he is a veritable miser. But Moll was standing in front of him now, and it was time to make a choice. For Moll, Bland decided to divorce. In this way, Moll gained her 5th husband, and her rich experience is staggering. Fast forward to 3 years later, the woman gave birth to 2 children for the banker and originally lived a very happy life. However, one day, the maid's urgent shout completely broke the beautiful peace. It turns out that the husband's merchant ship transporting goods encountered a storm at sea, causing him to lose his fortune overnight. The man couldn't bear the blow. His energy and blood attacked his heart, and he fell into a coma. The wife quickly called a doctor to try to save her husband's life, but unfortunately, the doctors were ultimately unable to save the life. In this way, poor Moll lost her 5th husband. All she could do was put coins in her husband's eyes, hoping that he would survive the journey to the underworld. The servants in the house were also in mourning. At the same time, the noise from creditors outside made the family even worse. Moll knows that she can no longer afford to pay her servants, so she asked everyone to take whatever they had at home, as much as they could, and she herself had to run away quickly to avoid being entangled by her creditors. Before leaving, Moll even takes back the coin she placed over her husband's eyes, and just like that, Moll leaves with her 2 young children. In order to give her children a better life, she had no choice but to put them in foster care with her husband's relatives, and she once again made her way through the troubled times alone. She first came to the apartment her husband had introduced. "Because I know the landlady is kind-hearted, I want to stay here temporarily." However, the other party had already heard about her family's situation and asked her to pay the rent in 2 weeks, which gave her a little grace time. But what can Moll do? She has very little financial support left, and even food and clothing cannot be solved at present, so the status quo must be changed immediately. One night, Moll got dressed and walked out of the room without knowing it. She didn't even know what her purpose was. She stumbled upon a package in front of a store on a table inside. The clerk was selecting items for customers, and neither of them apparently noticed her. A bold idea came to Moll's mind. She took advantage of the other party's inattention, decisively took away the things on the table, and quickly walked out of the door, feeling full of anxiety. After returning to her apartment and calming down, she eagerly opened the package. The contents inside were eye-catching and gave Moll a new understanding of himself. She finally admitted that she had become a thief. The sound of the door opening immediately brought her back to reality. Moll tried to hide the stolen items, but the landlady was already standing in front of him. The landlord asks Moll why she looks so nervous and when she plans to pay the overdue rent. Fortunately, Moll quickly regains her composure and claims she is sorting through belongings sent by a cousin back home. Hearing that Moll had items that could be exchanged for money, the landlord did not continue to ask questions and even introduced her to a pawn shop. As long as it is introduced by the landlord, the boss will give the price according to the market regardless of whether the item comes from the wrong source. It seems that the landlord didn't really believe Moll's words. Early the next morning, Moll came to the pawn shop. Faced with the woman's pretended calmness, the experienced shopkeeper seemed to understand the situation tacitly, but in the end he still gave her 2 guineas. With this money, Moll not only paid off the rent as soon as possible, but also specially treated the landlord to a luxurious meal, which can be said to be a perfect example of human sophistication. But even so, Moll was still very uneasy. Alone in her room at night, she even knelt on the floor and begged God for forgiveness. However, with only a few coins left in her hand, she had to sink deeper and deeper into crime. The next day, Moll prepares to go out and try her luck again. Unexpectedly, as soon as he walked into an alley, noisy shouts came from behind. A panicked thief ran into the alley, threw the stolen goods into the corner, and asked Moll, who had witnessed everything, not to tell anyone. Moll tells no one and quietly keeps the stolen goods for herself. When she calmly left the scene with the stolen goods, she unexpectedly discovered at the street corner that the pickpocket had been caught. The woman tried to hide the package, but the other party had already seen everything. What's even more surprising is that the thief turned out to be a girl in disguise. Seeing a group of men pulling at her frantically, Moll couldn't bear it. But now that things have come to this, what can I do? In the days that followed, Moll became more and more adept at stealing. She is no longer condemned by her conscience, but regards stealing as a daily routine, and is always looking for ways to obtain property. She would even go back and share it with her landlord to feel the joy of the windfall. She admitted that she was a bad woman and was getting worse every day. She didn't even let go of a young child. Seeing the little girl standing alone on the street corner, Moll took the initiative to talk to her. After learning that the other party was waiting for her mother, Moll held the girl's hand like a human trafficker and pretended to take her to find her mother. In fact, she just took a fancy to the necklace around the girl's neck. While the girl was bending over to tie her shoes, Moll unceremoniously took off the necklace, but the girl noticed the slight touch immediately. Realizing she has been discovered, Moll even considers silencing the witness for good. She grabbed the girl and tried to kill her after entering the alley, but the little girl seemed to feel that her life was threatened, so she kept resisting and pulled Moll back from the abyss of sin. Moll warned the girl to keep quiet and never tell anyone that she had seen her, otherwise he would definitely come back to find her. Back in her room, Moll stares at the necklace she stole as the girl's pleas echo in her ears and guilt weighs heavily on her soul. She lay awake all night, praying earnestly to God for forgiveness. Perhaps this was a turning point for her to change her mind, but in fact, this is just a transit station. Gradually, Moll's illusions of self-redemption dissipated again. One day, she wanted to go downstairs to find something to eat, but unexpectedly bumped into her landlord having a cordial conversation with a girl. The girl in front of me looks familiar. Isn't she the pickpocket who was captured in the first place? Thinking of this, Moll was so frightened that she thought the other party had been hanged. But instead of condemning Moll for what she did, the girl invites her to sit down. It turned out that the girl's name was Lucy, and she was a close friend of the landlord. They both share the same idea of hating men, so they often spend time together. They even invited Moll to join them and feel the comfort each other brings in this troubled world. Moll agreed without hesitation, and Lucy even volunteered her enthusiasm. The three of them reached a consensus and continued their theft career while having fun. But can everything really go as one wishes? On the surface, they are beauties in the city, but in fact they are pickpockets traveling among the wealthy class. All Moll has to do is use her beauty as a distraction, allowing her accomplices to trap the target. But this is far from satisfying the thief's vanity. When they see a wealthy gentleman throwing money to performers on stage, they immediately know they have found their next target. The man was unsuspecting of the beauty in front of him and actively invited the two of them to sit next to him. Moll, like a veteran who has been around for many years, pocketed his ring while the other person was not paying attention. The accomplice was not idle either and quickly took away a bag of gold coins. While the gentleman was still intoxicated, the two of them had already left the scene quietly. The whole process was so smooth. Looking at the stolen treasures, they laughed loudly in the carriage. The feelings between the two that go beyond friends also continue to heat up with their respective loneliness. After returning to the apartment, they took advantage of their joyful mood to open the shackles that had imprisoned them for a long time. But if you have been on the road to crime for a long time, how can you always have smooth sailing? One day, Lucy was caught red-handed while stealing. Moll rushes over and tries to cover for her companions, but Lucy is still clutching the stolen pocket watch. No matter what Moll says, she cannot hide the fact that Lucy committed the crime. After returning to the apartment, Moll even imagined that Lucy could become pregnant so that she could escape the death penalty. But in the past few months, Lucy has not had a relationship with any man except Moll. Sure enough, the judge finally sentenced Lucy to hanging and took her to the execution ground that day. This was the result of her self-degradation, but she never regretted her crime. A large crowd gathered at the corner of the vegetable market, and Moll was certainly among them. In the first half of Moll's life, Lucy was perhaps her most trusted friend. They are closer than sisters and are each other's true and loyal companions. With the law enforcement officer's order, the carriage supporting Lucy was driven away, and the rope tightened around the female prisoner's neck instantly. The scene erupted into cheers. Seeing the dying person struggling desperately, some people even took the initiative to step forward and hug her shaking legs tightly. It's all over. Moll left this place full of guilt and sadness. From then on, she no longer cared about anyone or anything, wandering alone every day like a soulless body. But beautiful women will inevitably attract attention from others. An elderly earl notices Moll alone and approaches her. His reason is simple. He hopes to get happiness from Moll and pay accordingly. Moll said that in this case, the other party can do whatever they want. This is a business no woman has ever tried, but now that I think about it, it seems that there is nothing wrong with it. Maybe this is another way of survival. So, Moll and the Earl came to a carriage and took the initiative to open their arms to each other, allowing the old man to experience feelings he had never experienced before. After everything was over, the woman took away the Count's precious pocket watch and a bag of gold coins without hesitation while he was still immersed in it. She didn't even let go of the accessories that symbolized the other person's identity and carried them with her. Before leaving, she even took the Count's wig away with her. Moll returned to the apartment and told the landlord about his previous experience. The landlord recognized the other party's identity from an exquisite gift box. It turned out that the knight had a high status in the local area and was also a real henkeeper. If Moll keeps entertaining him, she may receive even more unexpected payments. But just this time, Moll had enough. She would rather go back to the old ways of robbery than rely on coaxing to become the woman behind others. Despite all her crimes, Moll is never caught. Every time I come back, the landlord will show a surprised expression, and so Moll continues advancing in her criminal career. Year after year, day after day, she transcended hope and fear. She no longer has the compassion she once had, only her desire for material things remains. But as Moll became more and more courageous, she was discovered by the store staff while stealing a piece of silk. Although Moll tries to escape into the street, the people behind her quickly catch up. Her fate will also be rewritten at this moment. Moll struggled and was taken back to the store. After seeing that the shop owner was a young man, she immediately made up her own tragic experience, hoping to gain sympathy from the other party. She asked the other party to let her go and expressed her willingness to compensate Silk. She lied that she was a poor, distressed widow who was tempted by the goods and made the mistake. She also asked the shopkeeper not to put herself in a desperate situation, otherwise her poor children would also starve. The man was indeed moved by Moll's plea. Unfortunately, they have already informed the patrol police, and no amount of rhetoric will help at this time. As a result, Moll was forcibly taken away by law enforcement officers, and her true identity was revealed to the neighbors. Moll was subsequently jailed in Newgate Prison, awaiting trial. The environment here is truly terrifying, filled with filth and decay. Seeing the new arrival in the prison, the prisoners crowded around Moll like crazy. Fortunately, the prison guards found a private room for her and even locked her up with chains. Moll reflects that she has finally returned to the place of her birth, bringing her life full circle. A few days later, Moll's landlord came to visit with food. She recently spent a lot of money trying to persuade the store owners who sued Moll to withdraw their lawsuits. But in reality, even the shopkeepers are helpless. Now we can only hope that Moll will find a kind judge and give her a lenient sentence. Sure enough, everything was exactly as expected. Even though Moll only stole a piece of silk, the judge still sentenced her to death by hanging. It seemed that she had no hope. But smart women can always survive in desperate situations. Moll actually announced that she was pregnant. According to the law at the time, the case had to be redetermined, which gave her a glimmer of hope. In order to see London's notorious female pickpocket with their own eyes, many ladies endured the harsh conditions of the prison and also wanted to see what kind of person Moll was. At the same time, a noble gentleman also walked in. After giving the jailer a small tip, he was allowed to stay alone inside. But Moll, who was reduced to such a situation, never expected that the man in front of him was Roland. Roland was her first love in her youth and the first man to abandon her. When Moll asks whether he can get her out, Roland immediately says he cannot. Now that he has become the mayor of Colchester, it is even less likely that his career will be affected by the fate of a dying man. Fortunately, Moll sees through him in time, or this hypocrite might have deceived her for far longer. Life in prison is miserable. Moll lied about being pregnant to temporarily save her life. Here she meets Annie, a woman with a similar problem. Just as the two were worried about their fate, a jailer suddenly walked in to talk. He said Moll's notorious reputation was about to be replaced by someone else because an important suspect was about to enter the prison. That was a gangster who affected the whole of England. Sure enough, the man was hauled off to Newgate prison. Even when death was imminent, he still could not hide his temperament, and even made the female prisoners become nymphomaniacs. However, Moll never imagined that this handsome #1 suspect was not the Jemmy he had longed for. With the help of a jailer, Moll took the initiative to go to Jemmy's cell and got an hour to catch up with him. After many years, although things have changed, they still love each other deeply. Jemmy also told Moll some good news. Instead of being hanged, he might be exiled. But Moll's fate remains difficult to predict. Faced with this brief but beautiful reunion, it was difficult for the two of them to suppress their excitement. After it was all over, both men had a tacit understanding because they would be in court for sentencing the next day. At this time, Moll seemed to remember something and took out a snuff box from his clothes. She had stolen it from a noble earl. She asked Jemmy, if he could survive, to give this thing to the earl and ask him to save his life. Otherwise, she would let the count's wife know what had happened between them. Early the next morning, a large crowd gathered at the court hearing. Jemmy volunteered to be exiled to Virginia. Faced with such a heinous criminal, the judge actually agreed, which also meant that Jemmy escaped the death penalty. But Moll's fate was completely different. It had been 5 months since she claimed she was pregnant, but there had been no obvious changes in her belly. Obviously, this was just an excuse she made up to delay her punishment. In anger, the judge sentenced Moll to death by hanging, and decided to publicly execute him on the streets of the market the next day. At night, Jemmy was taken out of prison. Before leaving, he gave the prison guard some tips. Moll placed all her hopes on Jemmy, but the man was ready to leave without looking back. However, the next second, he suddenly turned back. Seeing Moll's eager expression, Jemmy seemed to have a plan and gave her a hint. Even so, Moll is still worried. She didn't know if she would ever see Jemmy again. The next day comes quickly. Moll even changes into the clothes she wore when she was first imprisoned. Even if Jemmy doesn't come to save her in the end, she still has to leave this world with dignity. Later, she and Annie were taken to the execution ground together. A large crowd of onlookers gathered on the streets. In the historical context of that time, theft was an unforgivable felony and was punished even more severely than other crimes. Moll and the other prisoners have nooses placed around their necks. As soon as the priest completes the ceremony, their lives will be over. But at this critical moment, the man who saved Moll finally came back. Jemmy brought a special petition, and Moll Flanders' sentence was commuted to exile in Virginia. The executioner then untied the rope from her neck. Moll's life is spared at the very last moment. After 5 marriages and encounters with countless powerful men, the one person she can truly trust turns out to be a con man. And with that, our recap of this adaptation of Daniel Defoe's novel comes to an end. It is a deeply powerful and unsettling story. The first half of Moll's tragic life resembles a moth struggling inside a dark whirlpool. Her experience is the epitome of the tragedy of the times. Poverty was like a shackle, making her drift further and further down the path of sin. Theft becomes not only her means of survival, but also a curse imposed by fate. But Moll is more than a fallen woman. Deep inside, she still longs for a better life. Defoe's insight into human nature is remarkably profound. The social world around her exposes every complex and contradictory side of her character. The novel acts as a mirror, reflecting society's cruelty and injustice alongside the resilience and helplessness people display in desperate circumstances. In the end, Moll and her husband settle in Virginia, where they become wealthy and highly respected citizens.